I love football, or soccer. From the anticipation days before the game, the pre-game warm-up and team talk, the in-game action, the thrill of a nicely weighted pass that leads to a goal. There's something humanizing about being part of something bigger than oneself. Yet sometimes I show up to games only with my body, while my mind is clouded by oppressive thoughts. This has been my journey with clinical depression. I often show up to the world as an empty shell, seemingly alive, but dying or dead inside. The worst of it was in 2019, when my wife was pregnant with our daughter.
My son was at his lowest point. He just confined himself to his room. So one time I asked my other son, I said, you need to go and check on your brother. And he said, Mom, we thought it was bad, but this is bad.
Black mental health, I think we are in a crisis. We've ignored it for so long as a community. We just haven't taken this as seriously because we've had to focus on other things in our lives. We're getting wrong messaging from different areas. The church, it says pray about it. Just the messaging that, it's not legitimately a medical issue when it is.
Caregiving requires, yes, you need the village, but you also need the energy and you need the finances.
There's a lot of financial pressure because at one point we just were living on one income. We're thinking about the future. Do we need to remortgage our house? And all of these kinds of things weigh on you.
And we know in many cases where caregivers are so tired, so fatigued from just the everyday stresses, the everyday responsibilities that they can't afford to take that time.
And so that is traumatic. It's another layer of trauma in addition to that intergenerational and systemic trauma that we experience on a regular basis.
For a lot of caregivers of elderly folks, a good proportion of them are elderly themselves. So they're seniors, like my mother was. And then caregivers in general also experience stress and burnout and under-resourced, right? Regardless of race. So when you compound all of those things and the ageism, that people experience in their day-to-day lives as seniors, what you end up with is that for a caregiver, there's research to show that just being a caregiver over the time, that stress can increase the likelihood of death by 68%.
Black people's mental health is affected because we're dealing with everyday trauma and the reality of living in a system that doesn't prioritize us. And so as a caregiver, you have to get over that extra wall in order to just get basic care.
We, I believe, especially in the Black community, we got to talk about it. We have to stop sweeping it under the rug. We have to stop making light of it and making jokes. Oh, well, that's Aunt Peaches, how she is, or, that's Uncle Charlie, and how he gets. If someone is really struggling, it needs to be dealt with. It needs to be talked about. They need to be supported.
As people of African descent, one of our traditional foundational beliefs is Ubuntu. We are, therefore I am. That speaks to the importance of a collective vision and a collective action towards each other. And so when it comes to this question of people in our communities that have disabilities or people in our communities that are suffering from mental health challenges, we need to have a solution that sees them as part of us.
As a parent, I think you want the very best for your child. You already paint pictures in your mind of what life will be like. But then when you get a diagnosis or you realize that your child is going to have complications, you want to lean on your community for support. And sometimes that support comes in the form of advice, criticisms, and sometimes it can be taken to heart.
Our mission at Adinkra Farm is to be a place where we build a sustainable community. And to do that, we have 3 pillars. We reclaim aspects of our traditions, our heritage, and our ways of being. We build institutions, we build community connections, and finally we grow.
This is a journey, and you really have to learn to take one day at a time. Some days it might be down to the hour. Dig down into that faith, whatever that means for you.
The way moving forward, I think, is for us to come to a community and really amplify the right messaging around mental health and to normalize these conversations around mental health.
We have to be talking about these stories. We have to be sharing, approaches and build our village with those who look like us and do not look like us, who is able to support us and help us have a pathway forward.
The best soccer teams in the world depend on a simple principle for their success. Players are taught to trust the process as they adopt a particular style of play. Once every player buys in, success often follows. As I continue meeting caregivers, I'm learning to trust the collective organizing principle of Ubuntu. This African principle encourages us to resist any instincts to face life alone, and instead to trust that life is better in community. I live with clinical depression, and so far, I've only benefited from sharing my challenges with my community. This is a message I want to share as I continue meeting caregivers across the country.